Hi there. This is a recording to explain a little bit about the difference between the transform node and a shape node. And I could have written the answer, but I always default to recording a video because I feel it's a little bit easier for people. But if you guys prefer me to create a text, and obviously for simpler things, I'm gonna just respond in text. But when a topic deserves a little bit more of in-depth explanation, I kind of prefer to do a recording like this one. So, but again, just let me know that if you guys what you guys prefer. So, transform nodes and shape nodes. So the Maya basically it is a little bit confusing. Like Tan shared this picture right here, and yes, it is pretty confusing. Especially when you're starting, because yeah, in this case here, you feel like this is um, the transform node. The, you feel like this is the 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 shape node, right? But instead of the transform node, but only when you turn on and when you open up the outliner here with the shape nodes turn on, then that's when you see the difference, right? So if you take that for granted, like if you take that and you kind of run with it because that's how Maya is designed, and it might be confusing, but it's just one of those things that you need to keep in mind. Um, but one of the things that I wanted to show here is that like a key difference, and I'm not sure if I already mentioned this in one of my videos. But I'm just going to repeat that if that's the case. So yes, in this case, there is a transform and there's a shape node. So, and again, it could be confusing, but only if you don't know the reason of why there is even a shape node, right? So Maya is a node-based application. So that means that everything that you see is node-based, has a node, right? So if you go here in a node editor, and I can select these two nodes and add them here, I'm going to show all shapes. So that means that so this is a node, right? And this is another node. So what that means is that every node in Maya has a specific task that it needs to do. And in general, a node is an entity that has an input and an output, and then inside of its node, there is some sort of calculation, right? So the reason why we have two nodes, a transform node and a shape node, is because the transform node, if I select the transform node and go into the attribute editor here, make sure that you're not in the shape node. Thanks Maya for making things very easy for me. So if I go into the attribute editor for a transform node, all the attributes that you see here, see transform attributes. So all of these attributes that you see here are specific to the transform node, right? And then all the stuff that you see here, which is a lot more stuff like smooth mesh and displacement maps, those are specific to a shape node, right? So in plain terms, a transform node is a node that it's a node that calculates the position in space of this node in this case, right? Uh, so the reason why, like if I select this and move it around, you see these attributes here, right? Those attributes are transform attributes. So if I open my transform attributes, I see these values here, right? But only because my shape node is let's say it's parented to this transform node, only because of that the shape that we see on screen, the shape moving with our transform node, right? So if you keep going back to the fact that Maya is a node-based application, in this case we need a node that will calculate everything that there is to know about transformation. So about translation, rotation, scale, everything, right? And there is a lot of math included with that, right? And then there is other attributes that are on the transform node, but that are not necessarily transform based. but they're conveniently on the transform node. Like for example, display, right? It's both on the transform node and on the shape node. But what's the main purpose of the transform node is to calculate the it's to calculate the position in space and the transform inheritance that we covered during the meeting. Instead, the shape node is a node that calculates how this object should be presented on screen, right? In this case, it's a sphere, right? So this shape node is a shape node of a sphere because it knows that it needs to draw those points on screen in a certain way to shape it like a sphere, right? But if you go here in the attribute editor inside the shape node, you see that there is everything that there is to know about the tessellation, the geometry, basically, right? The actual geometry. So there is mesh component displays, tangent space, mesh control, but there is also it's something that is similar to the transform, which is display, right? Because they both kind of you can have both. You can interact with the display with both nodes. But the main important thing is that if you remember, this is the shape node is so that Maya knows how to draw what shape to draw our object in our viewport, and this is purely just how to move it, rotate it, and scale it in 3D space. Because a lot of times, especially when you start doing like very sophisticated rigging operations, like right now, it's just super simple because all I'm doing is I'm moving in space and I'm getting some translation and rotation values, right? So you say that there's not a lot of calculation there. So why do we have to have its own node for putting these numbers in here? Well, if you start doing like some really complex and sophisticated rigging operations, then you will see that simplicity gets much complicated, but it's a complication that you just don't see because a transform node will take care of it, right? So the same thing as if I duplicate this and then parent it to this guy right here, and now this is moving with it, right? If you like it or not, even though it's just a super simple thing to do in Maya, but it is a calculation that now this transform node for this node, this transform node right here, like this one right here, has to calculate, okay, what is my parent doing? So okay, then I need to do this and transform like this in space. And again, when you start putting constraints on top of things, then you start to see how with few clicks, the math that this node has to do is pretty sophisticated, but for the user it's very simple. I think there was something else that I was gonna cover. I'm gonna pause this and think about it for a second. So yeah, the other thing was to answer the other question is what is the use of a shape node, which I think I just explained it, and how do you choose to display it or hide it? I'm assuming that you're thinking of displaying it here, right? So the way I work personally is to just leave it off, right? Because I know that if there is a something on screen that has some either a curve or polygon or NURBS or whatever, then it has a shape node underneath. Like if I see something on screen, it has a shape. If I see a type of geometry or curve, I know that it has a shape node, right? But also, like if I do, for example, if I do a locator, right? A locator is composed by also a shape node, right? So, or also, so I pretty much always keep it on. Keep it off. Because just so it's a little bit, when your hierarchy here in the outliner gets much more complicated, you want to minimize as much as possible what you have to see on screen. So if you know that you see something on screen, you pretty much know that you have a shape node. And so, that's why, basically, if you think about it, like this one tells you the transform of that node, and this one tells you what is the shape node underneath it. Basically, if you think it's probably better to think about it that way. and then you can have also the actual null, which I press here. I press Control G, or you can say create empty group. It's the same thing. And Control G by having anything selected. Otherwise, it will group whatever you have selected. So if you have this this null right here, this null is a transfer. It's purely a transform node that does not have any. Excuse me. That does not have any shaped nodes underneath it. So so you know that when you see this, it's purely a transform node, or it's purely a group, or it's basically the same thing. But when you have this, is your your transform node is called locator 1, and your shape node from this little icon, you know that it's a locator. Same thing with this one, you know that is a polygon, and if I create a NURBS, you know that is this right here. So as you start working more and more with it, it'll become second nature. But I think that's probably the best way to think about it. Then the other one is the parent. Yeah, the parent is a little bit tricky. Is a little bit I don't know. It's a little strange. Like I remember when I started, it was a little bit difficult to wrap my head around as well. But it's because you don't have in Maya, when you can easily parent a transform node under another one, just because, like I said before, the transform node is what calculates all does all the math for you to draw something in space in a specific space, like in a specific position and rotation, right? But a shape node is a little bit different because it does not have that kind of information. Does not have in what position to be drawn, right? So the only way to do it is to put it under a transform node, and the way you do it is through that command. However, you know, to throw a little bit more hay on the fire, meaning that I might make things a little bit more confusing, but I think it's worth mentioning, is that you could have like right now I have let me delete this one right here. Let me put this to 0. So you could have, if I move this right here to a value of 1, or -1, so a value of 1 right here. So my transform node has a transform of 1, right? But if I want to move the shape node, which I'm not really moving the shape node, but if I take the shape node and move it right here, let's say if you look down here, it's at -2, I believe. So if you keep your eyes there, down there, see, if I go to -2, right? Now I moved. Let's see. So now I have my transform is right here, still right here, because I didn't move the transform. I mean, I moved my transform of 1 unit here, and it's still there. But then I moved my CVs back, right? So, and I didn't move really the shape node. I just moved all the components of the shape node, because if I look at it in every single CV, here I have what's called as the local transform for those CVs. So if I move it right here, this is the local transformation for that CV. So Maya keeps track of how you are moving these CVs around, and this plays an important role with when we start doing deformations, because when you skin when you skin a geometry to a skeleton, the skeleton, what it does is basically moving CVs around, right? The same way I did it here, but here I selected manually. When we skin a geometry to a joint, is when the joint is going to move these vertices around, right, through skinning. So the reason why I explain that is because you can move a shape node, but you can have the illusion that you're moving a shape node, but you're actually translating these the components of the shape node. So that's and again, that's more for deformation. So I hope this was clear, and if you have any other questions, just let me know. If there is anything like it, this is like one of the most important things to know, because it's such a foundational thing, that the more you know about it, the more you can make good decisions later on, right? So yeah, please let me know if you have any other questions, and I will talk to you later.